next we have a talk on UX and LX research, incorporating participatory design into learner dashboards. So I'm really looking forward to this. And we have three presenters to do it justice over the next hour. Kasha Williams from University of North Texas, Janetta Boone from NASA, and Danita Bradshaw Ward from Dallas College, the Eastfield campus. So we're delighted to have all of you here from Texas, even though I realize here is online, but it still feels like the right thing to say. Thanks for joining us, and we're looking forward to the presentation. So let me turn it over to the three of you, when you can share your screen whenever you'd like to, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Hello.
Great.
Thank you for the introduction, and we will get started. I'm sharing my screen here.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, thanks. So again, thank you guys. Thank you for the introduction and welcome. My name is Kasha Williams, and I'm here to present along with Danita Bradshaw Ward and Janetta Boone. And we are presenting on UX plus LX research, incorporating participatory design into learner dashboards. So again, my name is Kasha Williams, and a little background about myself and what I'm bringing to this presentation and to the study that we're working on is I'm an MBA from Florida A&M University, and my undergrad is in accounting. Right now, I'm getting my PhD in learning technologies at the University of North Texas. And so a little about what brought me to this PhD program. I have industry experience as an auditor at Ernst & Young, and I went on to work as a senior accountant for oil and gas companies. And from there, practicing accounting, I went on to teaching accounting. So I taught accounting and business technology courses. And throughout that process, with being engaged in learning and all of the new technology used with accounting, I wanted to get more into learning technology. And so that's what brings me here today. I'm a PhD student at UNT, and I'm researching learning and technology, utilizing both quantitative and qualitative methods of research. So with that, so an overview of what we're going over today is LXD. And what that is, it combines ID and UX. So ID stands for instructional design, and UX is user experience. Together, those combine to make a fairly new term called learning experience design. And so what we're doing here today is basically a panel trying to do a little discovery research to understand what's going on out there in the real world. So is learning experience design something that they're seeing, and what do they see in academia versus what they're seeing in industry? And so at the end of this discussion, I want to take this information, and it'll be used in a study that I'm working on in my PhD program on incorporating LXD principles into learner dashboards. So before we get into the dashboards, I'm going to break down basically the ID, the UX, and the LXD. So instructional design, ID, this is something that is formalized by now. So we've all seen it. Instructional design is defined as a systematic process that is employed to develop education and training programs in a consistent and reliable manner. So you can go major in instructional design. It's been around for a very long time, and it's an established field with many research studies done in this area. In addition to instructional design, usually the first and most common one you'll see is ADDIE, and that stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation. And so ADDIE is a formalized linear model created back in 1975 and adopted by the military. So again, it's pretty formal, it's been around a long time, it's established. UX stands for user experience. And so this is not necessarily something you'll go get a degree in. A lot of this is seen on the job in design fields. So UX, user experience, is having empathy in design and looking at from the customer's point of view. So instead of creating a product or a training and pushing it onto the learner, you are incorporating them into the design to begin with and having empathy. So user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. Some examples of the methods used, the one that I'll be getting into is participatory design, but there's also ethnographic research, personas, empathy and journey maps. But participatory design, again, is involving that end user, in this case, the learner, in the actual design to begin with. Getting their thoughts, getting their opinions, doing questionnaires, doing a focus group. So trying to learn exactly the best way that they learn and how to develop, in my case, these learner dashboards that will benefit them the most in their self-regulated learning. So that brings us to LXD, which again is learning experience design. It's a synthesis of instructional design, educational pedagogy, neuroscience, social sciences, design thinking, and UI UX. It's critical for any organization looking to compete in the modern educational marketplace. And so you're starting to see actual, on LinkedIn, actual job descriptions referring to it as LXD, learning experience design. So this is definitely something that is starting to be out there. So that's why we want to do some exploratory research to see what's going on. So again, it's empathy. It's not just creating, going through ADDIE and pushing out a product. It's instead also thinking about what that learner wants, what are their needs, how do we empower them and engage them? Because learners today, again, do have more empowerment. Another thing is moving at the speed of business. So when you're seeing this out in industry, you want to be able to not analyze to death, but to create a product and get it out there that's going to benefit the learner. And so here's just a graphics that's showing that it is very interdisciplinary. You can see the user experience design and you can see the instructional design, but you can also see many other areas that are incorporated into this new field. So in the center of all that, though, is the experience. The focus is on the experience and designing to create an engaging experience for the learner. So I will move forward and we'll start to look at what they're seeing both in the academic field and in industry as well. So before we do that, again, after they're done, I'll come back and we can talk about how we can incorporate all of this into building learner dashboards. So, but next up, let's move on to Danita Bradshaw Ward.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Welcome. I hope that you find this discussion very helpful as well as informative. So again, my name is Danita Bradshaw Ward. I have been a professor at Dallas College Eastfield campus for the past 17 years. Prior to teaching, I was a molecular DNA technologist at the Institute of Metabolic Disease at Baylor Medical Center in Dallas. Currently, I am a PhD student at the University of North Texas in the Learning Technologies Department. So when I began my career, I've always had the idea I was going to go into biological sciences. So once I graduated with a master's in molecular biology, I began my career, like I said earlier, as a metabolic DNA technologist, where I basically did work, research as well as clinical work, looking for novelty mutations in metabolic diseases. I loved the field. It was rewarding. I enjoyed it. But I started teaching part-time at Dallas College and just fell in love with teaching. And so my focus transitioned into academia. So with a bachelor's degree in biology, molecular, biology was my master's degree. I started to kind of change my focus because of, how should I say it? I started teaching classes and I was fresh out of college. And so I understood the challenges of students, but now I had a different perspective as being an instructor and identifying ways in which I needed to engage students. So I wanted to make sure I grew my students in critical thinking skills. I wanted to make sure my courses engaged students to prepare them for future courses as well as their careers. So I began teaching hybrid first. So I developed hybrid courses for general biology and anatomy physiology probably 13 years ago. And then we started transitioning and offering more online courses. And then of course the pandemic hit and everything went into an online format, including microbiology, which we had never offered before. So when we start looking at biology courses, specifically online biology lab courses, it's challenging. We're dealing with having inadequate course design, inadequate delivery. And so with that, we also have to preserve the rigor and maintain that hands-on lab experience for our students. So when I go into developing a course, one of the things I try to do is I try to incorporate engaging activities and assessments that are student-centered, that are going to promote the acquisition of knowledge. And so in the process of doing that, as a content expert, but not an instructional designer, I rely heavily on the feedback of my students. So the student feedback is what allows me to remodel, to rethink my courses from semester to semester. So when I'm developing, when I'm developing or remodeling my online courses, there are several factors that I addressed in an attempt to make sure that I'm creating what I refer to as an effective course. So I want to make sure I address the learning objectives. I want to ensure that my students are learning what they're supposed to know. I want to make sure that my students are equipped so that they can be successful, in my course, but also in the sequential courses ahead of them. I want to make sure those activities and assessments are engaging, that they create a sense of interest, passion, inspiration, motivation to learn the material. And then also those assessments, I want to make sure that they're challenging the students to not only grasp the material, but also to be able to apply critical thinking skills, prepare them for the workforce. Most of my students are going into nursing or the medical field, so I want them to be able to have those critical thinking skills that they're going to need later. And then the last thing that I want to make sure I'm incorporating is going to be an environment that encourages collaboration, innovative thinking, as well as learning. So as I began my doctoral journey, my area of research has been online biology lab courses, and comparing those to traditional biology lab courses. Can an online biology lab course be effective? And from the research, and it's been really an exploratory research so far, what I found is a common theme. And the common theme is that a well-designed online biology course can be as effective as a face-to-face biology course. So when we say a well-designed course, what really does that mean? We know that it's going to require adequate instructional design. And so the ability to identify the instructional tools that are going to meet my instructional goals, the learning objectives, is going to be necessary. But again, we need the students to be engaged. That's going to be a factor that's required to allow for this course to be effective. And so as an instructor, and remember, I am not an instructional designer or a user experience specialist. I've stumbled over the years just trying to identify what works well, what didn't work, what should I try next time? And I don't have all the answers. And so I have, went through multiple trainings to try to identify, what's the best way to design my courses so that I meet all these factors, all these objectives that I'm trying to meet. And so what really does make a course an effective course? And so for my opinion, I believe the specialists of instructional designers with user experience training can bring answers to this particular question. So as an instructor in large institutions, what I would like to see is the availability of instructional designers that can actually take the lead in course design. From my experience, the design, user experience is the responsibility of the faculty. I've lived it. I have to create my own courses. And so that creates unnecessary errors in course design. It's just an inefficient process to require that content specialist to understand as well as to incorporate course design without the proper support. So ideally, the incorporation of a learning experience designer, I think would aid faculty in course development. It would relieve the workload of inexperienced course design faculty. It'll also increase the efficiency of delivery of effective courses that are going to meet the learning objective. It's going to provide an engaging learning environment. So in LXD, it could provide, those individuals could provide the outline of the types of correspondence, assessments that are needed to provide an effective course that, you know, is going to do everything that we want. It's going to be engaging, it's going to promote learning, it's going to create the ideal environment for students. And so I think as we go further, I think that, you know, that is going to be an area of interest. Hiring, bringing in LXD individuals who can aid faculty in the course design. And so later on, when if we have our panel and our discussion, I hope that you all will bring questions or maybe resolutions to this particular topic. So the next area of discussion is the use of ID, UX, and LXD in industry. So please welcome Janetta Boone.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here and join the conversation that Kasha and Danita have been presenting so masterfully already. I'm going to go ahead and give an industry perspective and what I am or am not seeing as far as instructional design, user experience, and LXD in an industry perspective. So here's my intro slide. My name is Janetta Boone, and like Kasha and Danita, I have completed my first year in Learning Technologies PhD program at University of North Texas, and that's located in Denton, Texas, USA. And by day, I work as an instructional technologist at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, and I consult and design and develop training for astronauts and flight controllers. And my research interests focus on innovative training technologies that can span the round trip. It's 44 light minutes round trip. So there's that 44-minute lag in time to communicate in deep space missions, which are classified as anything beyond low Earth orbit. And eventually, we're hoping to get Earth independent training. So for my portion here today, we'll go ahead and take a look at what training currently looks like at NASA and possible applications for LXD. So what do I see right now? I see evolving roles and evolving lessons. So as you can imagine, it's a little bit of a vacuum due to proprietary government measures. It's a rather unique student base of astronauts, but the principles of user experience and instructional design are here. There are a little over 50 astronauts currently training in Houston, and each expedition instructor gets assigned to a specific astronaut crew. So here you see crew 2 taking a selfie at a recent training they did. So the instructors assigned to the crew are with them throughout their 2 to 3 year certification flow, the training flow. And historically, this has been an important model to ensure that there's personalized mastery by each one of these crew members of critical mission skills. And so the expedition instructor is the one who oversees that personalized learning. However, just like Danita said, and just like I'm sure a lot of you in the audience today are experiencing, COVID is disrupting our traditional historical models. So in our case, the instructors were not able to meet the astronauts on campus in person as they typically did as usual. So like some of you, one of our solutions is we began hybrid lessons and trying to just minimize in-person contact situations. So we asked the crew to take certain portions of a lesson as a CBT, a computer-based training, and then come for the traditional classroom portion of the lesson subsequent to that, because that part that they need to be on campus for is may require like certain facility equipment or hands-on tool training. And so that part can't be taught by a CBT. So I wouldn't say that COVID changed the astronauts into self-learners, because these are already like overachieving individuals and they're excellent at owning and having responsibility for their own training. But I would say that there has been an evolution of sorts of instructor and student roles entirely shifting as we assign the crew work ahead material. So these hybrid lessons are a big deal for us still. So in our next slide, we'll take a deeper look into the benefits that we're seeing from these hybrid lessons. So wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive here and look into some specific metrics on this slide and on the next slide of trends and why they have been big for us. So the fact that these hybrid lessons can be mostly asynchronous provides immediate flexibility of doing things on their own time and in their own homes, and allows them to review or learn any course content prior to the classroom or facility lesson. And we're able to design and develop interactive elements into these CBTs that enhance absorption rates for the learner. And so they're not only coming to a classroom lesson with more knowledge than they might have come without the CBT, but they've also been able to use things like pause and play buttons or menus to self-select anything that they might need individually, and save the time of playing through the whole thing, since this is often a review. So they can self-pace by skipping over anything that they already know in their own field of specialization, and they can go back and repeat a concept that they haven't really mastered, and they can do that on their own timetable. So the degree of self-pacing that I was just describing is just simply not very plausible with a whole group sitting in a classroom, but it is when you're self-pacing yourself. So this is really the key to self-pacing. I'll substantiate it by just reading verbatim here on the left column on the screen. Interactive video training made up of elements such as play and pause buttons, menus, and hotspots and search functioning allow the user to self-pace and absorb training content in a non-linear way. So second slide here, just diving a little bit into some metrics, is we have something called consultations, and they're a built-in part of the certification flow training, and they occur typically within a month of launch or blast off. I like that term as well, to certify flight readiness pre-launch. So consultations usually occur, the standard is for them to occur between the crew member and the assigned expedition instructor. So the instructor historically has taken the consultation time to review any information that maybe needed a little more instruction or some extra time to focus on that. So now with these hybrid lessons, the crew member can do a lot of review on their own and come to that consultation with specific questions or self-identified gaps in their training. So instructor time is shown in this chart here that we made. The first column lists the lesson class times. This particular simple metric here is doesn't take into account any preparation time of the instructor just actual classroom time that the crew member would be sitting in the classroom. So adding up that entire left column, it actually comes to 41 instructor hours. And so that is a full week of work time saved. Other columns are itemizing 3 different things like fully virtual classes, hybrid classes, and facility requirements. So hybrid classes are freeing up facilities and instructors, and therefore allowing those instructors to be available to create new content for upcoming programs like the Artemis program. So this is really exciting. It's just a small sample size from the ADCO discipline. ADCO stands for Attitude, Determination, and Control Officer. So there's a lot of acronyms at NASA. In fact, NASA itself is an acronym. So that's just one of the console disciplines in mission control. And so we hope those changes don't just affect ADCO, which is where we started, but also ripple through the agency. So going forward, with those roles and training that are evolving, as we sometimes saw, and are even role reversing, where a student becomes their own instructor and the instructor is taking cues from the student on where any of their own training gaps lie. What I hope to see next is an optimization of training roles. So this may ring true for anyone in the audience with us this afternoon. Sometimes as an education or training practitioner, then we're kind of required to be the project manager, scriptwriter, and developer all at once, simultaneously. And sometimes that can get a little tricky, trying to consult with a content owner or a SME and letting them know maybe their questions aren't testing the lesson objectives or other fixes that we might find in their content or structure. And because we want to stay true to instructional design and instructional systems design, but that desire can sometimes be compounded if we're also the forward face for the project and managing resources and ensuring that the deadlines are met. So sometimes those 3 feel like competing hats. So my wish list would include maybe different individuals or different talent for each of those training pieces. And Kasha's research has me really wondering, is there another hat for an LXD professional? Because cost is typically managed by that project manager and content development by the scriptwriter and the developer. And what the learner wants, or as Kasha put it earlier, like empowering that learner, what that learner wants can be managed by the LXD professional. So with our students our astronaut students taking a much larger role in training, this is a really important new piece to consider. So thank you for your attention, and now we'll have a panel discussion. I'll turn the time back to Kasha.
All right, thank you, Janetta. Thank you, Danita. So those were very good discussions as far as seeing what's on both sides, and we'll get into discussing these things. But one thing I do notice that really stood out was you both mentioned having to wear multiple hats. And, in an ideal world, those hats would be worn by different people who specialize in different areas. So to start off, I wanted to go over a couple of topics that are being discussed a lot in instructional design and just in the learning community in general, and that is accessibility. And so, Danita, I'm going to toss it to you because I know, especially in academia, this is something major that affects your everyday life now.
Yes, absolutely. So at Dallas College, we had an initiative a couple of years ago to make sure that all of our courses, regardless if they were face-to-face, online, hybrid, they had to be completely accessible. And so when they meant by accessibility, we're talking about every document, every PowerPoint, everything that we place into our LMS had to be completely 100% accessible. And so they actually incorporated a a software in LMS that checks our courses regularly. And if our courses are not 100% accessible, it sends us a report via email that says, hey, your course is not 100% accessible. I need you to make sure this course is accessible. I appreciate that aspect into our courses. You know, we want to make sure that it's accessible for all of our students, but it does create some issues when it comes to the ability to deliver the content the way in which you really want to deliver that content. I am a Quality Matters certified, which is a program to make sure that your courses are certified, accessible, what have you. And I peer review a lot of my other colleagues' courses. And I didn't realize how much accessibility affects academic freedom, instructors' freedom. So we have an art appreciation course, and it was the most colorful course that I've ever seen. It was great. It had, wonderful aspects to it, but unfortunately, it's not considered accessible because you have to look at color content, a contrast, excuse me. You have to look at, you have to take into account of everybody's abilities or disabilities. And so accessibility, I think, plays a role in delivery of content. And so I think that since we're still talking about instructional design and we're talking about user experience and the LXD, LXD is going to be very important when it comes to accessibility, because not only are they making sure this content is being delivered, but now they're going to have to look at the user experience. And the design is going to have to be where all users, regardless of their disabilities or non-disabilities or what have you, it has to be accessible for all. So the LXD is going to be important when we start addressing accessibility.
And, I definitely agree about, how important it is for accessibility, because again, we want to make sure that we're incorporating and reaching every individual. And again, the whole idea of UX, user experience, within LXD is incorporating that user experience. And, the learner is the empowered learner. And, we need to make sure that we're meeting needs and addressing that accessibility, and the LXD role can certainly help in that area. So Janetta, are you seeing this in your role as well? Or is there a certain, in industry, is there a certain person that is addressing that? Or what do you see on your side?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, it being a government institution, we have specific in-house style guides, in-house accessibility standards and best practices. It's really important to send it to export control because there's a lot of international partners who work on the space station altogether. In fact, its name is the International Space Station, and there's multiple partners there. So everything has to be very accurate. Space is a dangerous industry, and making sure everything gets communicated accurately is very important, but also empowering each learner, regardless of language, regardless of location or culture, to really be able to understand that content in the best way for them. And so we do have export control specialists who make sure everything goes out properly and accurately, but there's also a space to fill, pun not intended, about getting it perfect for the learner, the learner experience in there as well.
Thank you. And I'm going to let either one of you jump in on this, but because it can be kind of a hot topic. What about, I initially was saying how instructional design is a very established field. It's a discipline within itself. You can get a degree in it. What about instructional design certifications? What would be good about that? What would be not so good about that?
So I'll go ahead and start with this one. As you're saying that, I jotted down experience versus certification. So I think essentially a certification could be and maybe Danita will have more to say about this, but a university saying, hey, our degree is our certification versus different companies coming in and saying, we're going to offer this certification. And once you take our classes and pay this fee, then you will be certified. So it's like, where's the veracity coming in there? And is it replicable, just like research? You know, can everybody take the same training and have the same certification? So I guess it's kind of a question of that standard certification versus, yeah, the word I just wrote down was experience. So I guess on the experience side, I would think of it more as an apprenticeship, or, you know, somebody coming in, applying for a job and saying, I've already been doing this for 13 years, for 25 years. Like, I don't need a certification. I could teach those classes on certification, you know? So it's kind of a split. I'm seeing the split there. Maybe Danita will have more to say about the university side or the certification side.
I think you have a great point, Janetta. You know, I'll just use an example. So at my institution, we've had situations, I'm sure others can relate to this, where we had situations where we have brought in people who had degrees, certifications, you know, they were skilled in, I don't want to, you know, put out the particular positions, but they were skilled in that particular position because they had certifications, they had degrees, but they were unable to use the job. They were unable to do the job because there were other people that had been in that place for years doing that job that were not certified. They did not have a degree, but they were more efficient because they had been doing it. They were, I guess you could say, self-taught, right? So I think it's kind of it's a slippery slope. I really believe that, because you have those that come in, they have the certifications, they have the education, but they may not have the experience. I mean, do I think, you know, some days I think, you know, I could probably be an instructional designer, right? I've been doing this for 13 years, developing my courses from scratch, you know, developing them to hybrids, taking classes here and there to understand, you know, the LMS and how to incorporate, and, you know, I think it's going to be a controversial, or as you said, a hot topic, because, you know, what are we going to do? So you have people come in, they're educated, they got their degrees, they got their certifications, but then you have those that have the experience actually doing the work. So I don't know, that's a hard one.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can definitely see both sides, you know, so, you know, it made me think about, especially today with the technology, the LinkedIn learning and boot camps and things you can do. I mean, Khan Academy, there's so many different ways to be self-taught and to pick up on skills. I guess just as if I'm someone hiring someone, is it a way to do like a technical interview? Is there kind of a screener to let me know, okay, you know what you're talking about, let's move forward with this. And so I think especially the more and more that there are going to be different avenues to gain skills, you know, HR needs to think more and more about how they're going to assess people, you know, versus whether you got your degree this way or whether you gained this skill this way, or whether you just have a hands-on experience. So, you know, those are things that we need to think about in the learning community and in instructional design as well. I did want to bring up the dashboards. So learner dashboards, basically using all this information to be the literature review and kind of background and exploratory research for creating a learner dashboard. And what that is, it's a dashboard that it's self-pacing and keeps you on track during your course. So in the LMS, you know, if you have Canvas or Blackboard or whatnot, usually you log in and you see on the side, you've got different dashboards. A specific learner dashboard would have personalized to you. So with creating the learner dashboard, what we're wanting to do is ask the end user, the learner, what are some of the things that you would like to see? And so some of the things that are coming up are a calendar to keep you on track, but also it could be a chat function to, there's a function that would pop up and say, okay, you scored low on this. Here's some people to chat with who excelled in this. So they're going to prompt you to do different things like that. And that's going to take a little bit of, AI technology and whatnot. But, those are some of the examples that learners are coming up with. And so what we're wanting to do is do a study to see what are some of the other ideas they can think of things that they could use this dashboard for. It could show, studies have shown that seeing things graphically, seeing where you are in relation to the class or in relation to how much you've completed, that those visual demonstrations actually motivate and keep you on task. And this kind of aligns with self-regulated learning, and which is really important now because a lot of things are online. And this shift to hybrid learning and things of that nature, I'll give an example of my daughter, for instance. I feel like she's taking a college course now, because she's logging in, she's doing the synchronous work, she's seeing the notifications on the side to stay on pace. And so, so these are the type of things that we're looking at and wanting to incorporate and ask about in the study for learner dashboards. So I just wanted to toss it back to you guys to see, is that something that you think would be useful? Have you already seen something out there in use? Or so Danita, I'll start with you.
Okay. So let me make sure I understand your question. So can you repeat your question for me so I make sure that I'm addressing it the way that you want?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just seeing if you've had experience with seeing a learner dashboard, or have you seen students utilize what's in their LMS, for instance? And do you think it's something that, if they haven't, if that's something that if it were introduced and promoted, that it would be useful for them to use to help them through their learning?
The LMS that we have, it is an option. It's an optional tool where students can, it keeps them, they have a calendar, it shows them exactly what needs to be done, when it needs to be done. And a lot of students do use it. It helps them, it helps me. So like, I know if, oops, I have the wrong due date in there and they're asking me about something that's due and it's not due for a while. So it kind of helps keep me on pace. But I think that it's something that should be an automatic, because I find that those students who utilize the dashboards do better. They do better. They stay on task. They complete on time. They complete sometimes early. It helps them with their preparedness. So it's not like, oh, I have this due tomorrow and they haven't done anything to prepare for it. So I believe that the dashboards shouldn't be an optional tool for them. I think it's something that is necessary. It should be used.
And Janetta, I'll have you speak on it as well. I know on the industry side, learning analytics is something that is very useful to try to see what your return on investment is, for instance. And these dashboards they produce a lot of data, a lot of useful data if you're willing to sit with it. And for instance, seeing how much time is spent in one task, seeing if they opened this video but closed out of it quickly, was the content not engaging? So, you could really, we talk about data, but you really have to sit with it and try to analyze it and see, again, from the user perspective, what does this learner want? What's going to help this learner? Obviously, this didn't work. Let's go back to the board. Let's always iterate and improve along the way.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. As far as return on investment, yeah, they go through these iterative cycles here where they take a lesson initially or a training initially, and they have the opportunity to provide feedback. So there's a lot of simulation training. And then at the end of each one, there's a debrief. So there's a lot of feedback loops happening here. I wouldn't say we necessarily are using eye tracking or anything like that, but we're literally just watching them and seeing how they're doing and taking, there is a lot of data, including biometric data that we take, like how did they perform when there was a fire emergency sim, or when they're underwater in the neutral buoyancy lab, this huge pool that they're under there. We're taking their perspiration rates, their heart rates, how are they doing? That is very good training to see how level they can be throughout these different emergency scenarios that get popped up at them. And so, yeah, looping it back, as far as an LMS, they have personal schedulers. Just this is kind of a unique situation where there are only about 50 students. And so they have personal schedulers helping them through, but they do have opportunities to log things in our in-house version of the LMS. And they can log different things that they'd like to know more about or flag them, kind of like Post-it notes. Kind of that's the equivalent of a dashboard, I would say, that we have going on here. Kind of just in-house keeps them on track, allows them to flag anything that they're really super interested in learning more about, or anything that was an individual learning gap that they've located.
Great. And so we left about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So we wanted to toss it back to see if there were any questions. And I will take a look at the chat as well.
Carla said something cool there. Carla was telling us that she had an interview there was a technical piece added. So I think that's pretty cool that she got to show her stuff, and that resonated with her. Thanks for your comment, Carla.
Go, Carla.
All right, other questions from the audience? Yeah, we do have a few more minutes if we want to go over some questions. All right, and I guess I'll just sort of ask, because I'm kind of curious to see the view within NASA about how widely accepted the idea of learning experience design is. Is there resistance from people who are still following traditional methods and are kind of reluctant to let go of them?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really pertinent question, actually. So in the shuttle days, moving from shuttle to ISS, there was a lot of resistance. Like, what do you mean we're going to have this floating human space presence? A permanent human space presence. Shuttle, as you guys will probably recall, is going up, coming down. It was reusable. It was there were multiple per year that were being launched. So that was a huge paradigm shift. The shift now is basically from the International Space Station, permanent human presence in space, over to Artemis, the deep space missions, where there's another huge paradigm shift. Like, we're not just going to hang out in low Earth orbit anymore. I mean, they're only approximately 200 miles from any spot on the globe. And so this is going to be a much bigger shift. There are always traditionalists, and I think it's just the nature of humans to resist change quite a bit. And there is a little bit of resistance, but we're trying to kind of pull it in with the talent and the people that we already have on board. And I think that it will eventually pull around. And like I said, our favorite tagline right now is Earth independent training. So at some point, it's going to really have to be about the learner, and they will be learning not just on the ground, but they'll also be learning on their way to deep space missions. So there's definitely room to incorporate it, and it's a little slow coming, but I think it will happen. That was a great question.
Thanks. No, that's great to know that you're having some success, because I think that's still it just, yeah, as you said, change takes a long time, and people grow up learning a certain way and they feel like that's the way it is. People, sometimes even more so the parts that felt sort of arduous and rigorous and almost painful, which are the parts that we really usually don't want. We like challenge in learning, but we really don't want this to feel like a chore and like it's not really relevant. But those are the things that sometimes people have trouble getting away from. There's the whole, maybe not in Texas, but I walked uphill to school in the snow, both ways, and so should other people. And it's hard to get kind of, past that. No, so that's great. So are there techniques you're using to try to get people to this point? It's really just kind of showing them, look at what we're doing, look at, kind of just getting better experiences out in the forefront, and then it becomes till you reach a tipping point and that becomes the norm.
Yeah, I would say demonstrations are creating conversations. So the more demos that can happen, the more people are interested in adopting that and absorbing it into their own little niche across campus. And those demos are helping a lot.
Great. Yeah, no, that makes sense. The more people see something, they also see that it looks really cool and it looks really different, and they get excited about wanting to do it themselves. So that's a really good point. All right, well, good. Other questions? We have questions from the audience or anything else you guys want to cover in the sort of last few minutes that we have?
I just wanted to thank my lovely panel for the great job that they did in bringing the different perspectives, both from academia and industry. So it is very different, and even in government, very different. And so the main thing that I saw that was the same is the being stretched thin and wearing many hats. You know, we still have to address all of these things, and it's starting to be more and more difficult to do so. And so just, you know, having, you know, like Janetta said, having a separate developer and having someone focus on accessibility, you know, all those things, I think that the learning community is going to have to eventually address because most people have specialties in these different areas. And so we need to take advantage of that. So, and so again, I'm really excited to go over UX, LX, LXD, all these abbreviations. It's really going to help in the study that I will be working on. So thank you.
That's great. Well, you know, we're excited to see the results. So if you want to come back next year and share the results, we'd love to have you. So great. Well, then I think we can, if there are no other questions, we can wrap up, and then I'll head to the wrap up in about 5 minutes for the day and see you over there at that next link. So Kasha, Danita, and Janetta, thank you so much for this session, which I really enjoyed. And it's a big topic and something everything we can do to get it recognized more and more and become fully the norm would be fantastic. So thank you once again to everybody, and for the rest of the day. I'll see you back at I guess it'll be in stream one, but it'll be a different link for the 5 o'clock brief wrap up, and then that'll take care of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.